Hi everyone. I know it's been a while since I posted it. I'm sorry about that. I just had some things in my life to deal with, and I hope to be moving forward now and posting more frequently. I'm going to aim for 2 videos a week. They're going to be campaign diaries, and once I'm caught up on the campaign diaries, I'm going to post topical videos, general advice videos, and experiment with some different formats and ideas as moving forward. So, again, sorry. You can expect more content from me more frequently, and yeah, so let's get started on the next campaign diary. So this session that I'm about to recap was another session that went rather well. It was a bit of a banger, you know. By the end of it, I'd found myself reflecting on a couple things. One, like kind of DM planning. Two, uh, filler encounters, and to a lesser extent, the role metaphor and storytelling meeting mechanics and what that's like. So let's go ahead and get started on this episode of The Ghost in the Machine, The Party in Space. So when we last left our heroes, they had just been involved in two separate assassination plots. One as active participants, or perpetrators, you might say, and the other mostly as spectators. The party was split, actually in three different places. Justice and Selena were in the bedroom of Bigglesby/Bigglesdew. They had just went toe-to-toe with two formidable opponents in Bigglesby and Enforcer Phanos, while Sovelius and Gilly were in the parlor enjoying a nice concert which turned into a bloody assassination of the Grand Duke of Midrim, Thornorian, at the hands of Beverly, the mysterious half-elvish figure. Meanwhile, all the while, Dryden was just getting released for jail and putting on his Sunday best to go to this party to which he had been invited to. So as Selena and Justice finish off that encounter and leaving that entire room ablaze, they leave that firestorm and are almost immediately surrounded by the Knights of Gleaming, the protectors of Cragmandu and the Duke of Narshley, who wear gleaming platinum armor. And they're very much, what is the meaning of this? Justice explains that they had taken out two would-be assassins that were plotting to kill the Duke, and that they were there as protectors, not as enemies, as the knights might think. And so the knights kind of put them in a holding pattern and say, wait here while we get the Duke. There's been something else in the other part of the castle. So meanwhile, in the royal parlor, Gilly and Sovelius have just witnessed the assassination of the Grand Duke of Midrim, and utter chaos has been unleashed in that parlor, and really all throughout the castle. People are scrambling to make sense of it and what to do and how to act. The Viscount of Antinia, Felix Lyon, dimension doors in and dimension doors back out briefly after the assassination, and brings with him Exemetor Callie. Exemetor Callie, in the previous episode, which I kind of forgot to cover, is the High Priestess of the Order of the Small Light. She is an Exemetor. An Exemetor is a High Priestess. It's a title. So Exemetor Callie, seeing this, immediately casts Revivify on the wounded and bleeding corpse of the Grand Duke, and it doesn't work. And everyone's starting to scramble, like, I don't think it's been a minute. Why isn't this working? What is happening? Meanwhile, Gilly dips out of that chaotic environment to go check in on her brother and sister, who were... So while approaching where Corwin and Corian, she believes that they headed off to, she overhears a conversation in the makeup room where Morgan has sequestered herself. She overhears a conversation between Morgan and Glitch. Morgan is yelling. She's not really concealing her voice that well. And so she's yelling at Glitch, and she says something very strange. She says, Charming Gilly was not part of the plan. I can't believe you did that. And she slaps Glitch and tells him, if you do something like that again, I'll send you back to where you came from. Gilly doesn't know what to make of this. Why is this international superstar, this elusive elven figure, why is she interested in Gilly? Why is Gilly the most important person in the world to her? They just met. Gilly checks in on her family. They're fine. Morgan's fine. Everyone's fine. And then the party reconvenes in their kind of quarters in the keep where they're staying, and that's actually about around the time Dryden arrives. The party reconvenes and they discuss kind of everything that transpired. They fill Dryden in on what he missed. They inform him that he had been released from jail because they had essentially made a bargain with Confessor Grantham and agreed to investigate and probably assassinate Lord Stilltower on behalf of the Imperial Confessory in order to secure Dryden's release and ensure Dryden's father a fair trial. The party, rather exacerbated, all go to their respective quarters and sleep. In the middle of the night, Sevilius, he's an elf, he doesn't really sleep. They do their little 4-hour trance thing. In the middle of the night, Beverly appears in Sevilius's room and talks to him and does a kind of a temperature check. Basically, where are you with all this? What are you doing about the blade? Whose side are you really on? Who are you, Sevilius? And Sevilius basically says, listen, I am still who I am. I still want elves to be, safe and not be discriminated against, and I want these things. But the Gish are very powerful. He's like, I want the blade. The Gish are too powerful to take on right now. He's like, I'm biding my time. I'm making the most of it. And Beverly informs him that he has friends and that they are working on getting the blade, and they should expect more things to come. The next morning, the party wake up and they convene in the Hall of Invention with the Countess of Avamere, the Duke of Narshley, and other major nobles, as well as Exemetor Calli. They are informed that Exemetor Calli and the nobles have agreed to attempt to resurrect the Duke using the spell True Resurrection, a 9th level spell. Exemetor Calli is a very powerful practitioner of the holy arts. She's going to lead this ritual, she's going to organize it, and it's going to get done today. At a lunch later that day, they are finalizing the terms of the ritual, who's going to pay for what, yada yada yada, and the nobles and the party meet he's a owner of a very popular pawn shop in Cragmandu. His name, a gnome named Wendell Wilkins, and he is a friendly little gnome, pale skin and a white little beard, and he holds kind of a monopoly on the diamond trade, at least in this far north on the Gishari continent. And so if people who are interested in expensive resurrection magic, like True Resurrection, they basically have to come to him to buy that kind of stuff. And halfway through the conversation, Mr. Wilkins talks to Justice, and only Justice, by pulling him into a kind of shadow realm, shadow dimension. He pulls him in and reveals himself to be the Wind, the Grand Master of the Order of the Mercurial Shadow. The Order of the Mercurial Shadow are the monks who worship the Traveler. They are assassins, they're revolutionaries, they're changebringers, and this is their leader. Justice, remember, is a level 3 rogue and a level 2 monk at this point. He's about to be level 6, and he's about to become a full-fledged shadow monk with all the neat little powers and things. The Wind is there to inform him that soon the training day is coming and to look for the Shadow Road. So the Wind informs him of that, and then they go back to normal conversation, and no one's the wiser. I call that little technique Shadow Cant. It's like Thieves' Cant, but it's a bit more mystical, right? The rest of the day carries on. The party doesn't do too much. I think they might have done some minor shopping, but nothing that I can particularly remember. This is a couple months ago now at this point. The ritual takes place on the overlook of Cragmandu. It's a kind of a park area, an overlook that looks upon the Great Span Sea, and the Duke's body is laid on a slab of stone, an altar, if you would. Exemetor Calli leads the ritual, and she has the backing of a gnome choir. It's a lovely ritual, full of singing and chanting, unusual for a priestess of the light, but Exemetor Calli seems to be a bit more fanciful, a bit more of a performer. They lay his body down, diamonds are set up, and diamonds outline his form, pretty good-sized little diamonds. One by one, as this chanting and the singing and the choir continue, Exemetor Calli lights the diamonds up one by one. They float up and begin to spin slowly around, one by one by one. As they spin faster and faster, the chanting and the ritual nears completion until they all come together and form a glowing, brilliant ball of energy. The ball of light lowers into the Grand Duke's body, completing the ritual. And nothing happens. Demeter Callie looks worried. She goes, I don't understand. This is, the magic of the gods. This is the most powerful resurrection magic we have. It's never not worked. I don't understand. There's utter silence in the crowd. Until they all start hearing in their minds, all of their minds, a voice. It's speaking incomprehensibly. It's just, a very kind of Sauron-esque kind of chant to it. A ball of void energy appears from the Grand Duke's body as the chanting gets louder and louder. Everyone shrieks and recoils in horror, and they begin to scatter. A massive blast of void energy erupts from this creature, this being. The party has to make they have to make charisma saving throws. They fail, and they are hurled into the void. When they land, they are no longer on Cragmandur. They are definitely no longer on Edda. Instead, they are each on their respective islands of rock and stone, a kind of dilapidated temple-like structure that is flying through space. As they look around them, they see nothing but stars and the blackness of the void. In the center of these structures flies a singular monstrous creature, a voidling. A incomprehensible arrangement of eyes and tentacles, and it says only one thing. Sovelius. The creature launches into a barrage of attacks. The party scrambles to figure out what to do. Gillies casts a torrent of magic missiles. Justice is casting haste on himself. Selena casts daylight, which turns out to be surprisingly effective against the creature. Dryden is dumping damage into this thing. He's rolling really high. He's rolling really well. He's doing like 20, 25 points of damage with each strike, and they're burning through it, but it's not doing anything other than saying Sovelius and launching a massive barrage of attacks at the Elven Prince. It's making 4 attacks around. It has legendary actions. It casts Reverse Gravity. It casts Phantasmal Killer. Sovelius goes down. He's unconscious. He's making death saving throws. And just before the Voidling's next turn, where it was about to make 4 tentacle attacks and almost certainly kill Sovelius, Dryden finishes the creature off with a final blow. Once that happens, the party is blasted back and they are hurled into the void. That's where we ended the session. So that was the party in space. That was the episode. It was a bit on the shorter side, I remember. I was trying to wrap things up, and it went really well. We all had a lot of fun. The party received that monster very well. They're like, that was really lethal. Like, what if we didn't have Featherfall to counter the reverse gravity? And what if Selena hadn't brought daylight? And what if? I was like, that's a good encounter. When it's like on the razor's edge of life and death, and yet you turn out victorious nonetheless. That is a good encounter. I was very, very happy and proud of myself and proud of my players for overcoming those odds. Proud of myself for setting up the encounter. I was proud of them for overcoming those odds. But the funny thing was, now that we've recapped it, it was just a filler encounter. It was something I made up mostly at the last minute. My decision to make it a legendary creature was at the last minute. Literally during the fight, I slapped legendary actions on it and made them up on the fly. And to so let's talk about that. Let's talk about filler encounters. Let's talk about kind of good versus bad filler encounters, and also about planning as a dungeon master. Okay. So, filler encounters, right? So let's start by defining our terms. What is a filler encounter? In the most generic sense, the most general sense, a filler encounter is anything that happens between the start of an arc or adventure and the end of a arc or adventure. It is the gelatinous cube, it is the lair, it is the chokers, it is the rust monster that you fought all to get to the end of the dungeon and defeat the vampire. It is the henchmen, the mid-bosses, and those kind of things that perhaps don't build into any kind of story and that are just fodder for your eventual goal and mission. Filler encounters have a long history in Dungeons & Dragons. To this day, they are implicit in the design and the understanding of D&D. So in 5th edition, you are balanced to having 6 to 8 hard or medium encounters in an adventuring day, right? It's part of the design. It's part of the math. It's part of the dice that you roll. Filler encounters are used to give a sense of scope and a length of time to an adventure, whether it be an adventuring day, an arc, whatever it is. It's the things that you do in between the biggest moments of the game. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with filler encounters. Some of your best memories will come from them. That being said, they've really gone the way of the dodo bird, and really more so they've changed as people have played D&D over the years, and with influence of shows like Critical Role and Dice Camera Action and this and the like, what people get out of filler encounters, what people expect, has changed over time. So I think it is easy to fall into a trap of a bad filler encounter, and it can be a bit more elusive to have a good filler encounter. So let's talk about what makes a good filler encounter versus what makes a bad filler encounter, right? So let's start with the bad news. A bad filler encounter, in my mind, is one that is only fulfilling the mechanical obligations of the system. It is one that you have put there for little more reason than I need my players to fight more things. And apart from that, you haven't thought too much, You're like, God, they haven't had a fight. It's what in cinematic terms we would call an action beat. And people playing D&D, I've seen it before, and I'm sure I've done it. In fact, in a way, I did it this time. People fall into the trap of, oh, we've got to have, a fight here. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get the players to get into a fight? How am I going to do, fight. Fighting is the only way we can move a story forward. They get into that trap, and that's not true, of course, and we know that. We know that. We know we have hours and hours and hours of lived experiences and live shows and ways to know that fighting is not the only way to move things forward in Dungeons & Dragons. So, a bad filler encounter is that. It is violence is the only way to move our characters forward. It is the only way to reward them, and it is the only way to live up to the expectations of the system. It used to be whenever your players pretty much did anything, you were expected to roll on a table to see how many, D4 worth of wolves or D6 worth of Yetis or whatever it might be, they were going to fight. And there's not too many tables that play that way these days. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's whatever works at your table. But I have sat down and played in a lot of different places. And I have to tell you that there is a real danger in having a fight for the sake of having a fight. So I would caution against it. That being said, that's exactly what I did here. I had a fight for the sake of having a fight. Or, at the very least, when I was planning for all of it, in my noggin, in my lonely fun as being a DM, I had gotten to this point because Selena and Justice had spoiled my plans. The two of them together had murdered Enforcer Phanos Biggledew and had prevented Biggledew from summoning the Shadow Demon. Which meant that a CR-15 encounter, which the party was supposed to fight, that fight was resolved by 2 members of the party. And the other 4 members of the party, while they got to witness something and did something, it ended up being, I had 2 over here in terms of experience and 4 down here. That was the cold, hard truth. And now, when I say experience, I just mean time played, not experience points. I use milestones. And I know that milestones are for this exact kind of scenario, but I needed, in my mind, right, another fight to get so that I could justify having everyone jump up to level 6. So I got to scheming, and I got to thinking, and I thought up of the Voidling and the Resurrection gone awry and all this stuff. And I didn't know what I was doing when I did it. But it ended up being a good filler encounter. And by when I say good, I mean it was well received at the table at the time. And on reflection, I have no regrets. I still think that was a good moment. And my players and I still joke about it to this day, and we make memes about it, and it was just a golden moment, right? So why it worked is because it reinforced narrative and lore themes that we had already established and talked about and made it real and relevant to the players. In the prior episode, in The Killer and Me, they had asked about Beverly's void dagger, and I had to explain the void, its origins, and that. And at the time, that seemed just like an interesting piece of lore that might be relevant because of the dagger. But then it was made real in an encounter that they fought for their lives. So they asked about it, and what I said is that the elves come from the land of the summer forever. It is a separate dimension prior to when they were in the material plane that they all lived in, and it's a lovely realm. It's always summer. It's a land of idyllic agriculture and peace and prosperity. It's Southern California without all the traffic. The elves lost that because one day the stars above came crashing down on the land of the summer forever, and that was the void. And it came for the elves and it killed millions of them, and they fled into the material plane to escape it. And the void is the omen of chaos, destruction, and a devouring darkness that comes for the elves, and it is their nightmares. And when I was explaining it to Sevelius, I said, it is the void. It cannot be reasoned with, bargained, negotiated, persuaded, intimidated, or deceived. And what ended up being very interesting is that was my explanation of the void. What ended up being very interesting was how the fight played out. So they get it just comes for them out of nowhere, no talking. And they get in there. And Gilly casts Magic Missile from her Wand of Magic Missile, which she had bought from me as a Mayor, and readies her action. And because she hears him, the void creature, calling out to Sevelius, and she's like, maybe it wants to talk. It doesn't. The void cannot be negotiated with. And so she releases the magic missiles once it begins attacking Sevelius. It's unrelenting in its pursuit. Sevelius is attempting to dodge all these blows. He's a blade singer, has a very high AC, he has access to the shield spell. He can have an AC of like 25 or 26 if he wants to. But the thing is still hitting him. I'm rolling very, very well. I'm rolling I rolled 18 like 4 times, so 28 to hit. And so then it gets to his turn, he casts Blur on himself. It's an illusion spell, right? The Voidling has True Sight. The void cannot be deceived. So I had this moment where metaphor and lore met mechanics, and I was even able to reinforce that in the moment. In fact, I remember Gilly said something like, "I'm pretty sure it will have True Sight," and one of the players or I after that said, "Right, the void cannot be deceived," and so that is what made it a good filler encounter, was that it reinforced narrative and lore and established something and made it real. And I don't think that your filler encounters always have to do that. I just think that if you want to create an obligatory fight that you're kind of sicking on the players, I think it's better if they do something, if the fight does something like that. I think that's time well spent rather than time wasted. And oddly enough, what kind of shadows this whole thing was the planning aspect of it. Whereas I, in an almost cosmic balance sort of way, the spontaneity of Justice and Selena doing what they did, throwing off my plans, caused me to spontaneously go after them in a way, which came together to form a good story, a good narrative, that we all had fun. And there was something almost poetic about that. And when I designed the Voidling fight, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm sure a lot of DMs will relate to this. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't see how all the pieces fit. It was only until we played through that I was able to see what I was doing all along. And sometimes when you're planning, it's, well thought out, and the players play right into your little thing, and you move them like the marionette pieces to your wonderful play that you've conceived in your head. And most of the time, / pretty much almost every other time, things go crazy and the castle's on fire and you don't know what's going to happen, right? But somehow, some way, the spontaneity of my filler encounter ended up fitting the narrative perfectly and working. And sometimes as DMs we just get lucky. And I think that my biggest takeaway is that filler encounters can serve a purpose and can be very fun. They don't have to be kind of apropos. They don't have to be off limits, that they can serve a purpose. And that when your players introduce a little chaos into your world, it's only right that you give it back to them. That was the episode, everyone. That was my campaign diary. I made it short, a lot shorter this time. Going forward, I'm going to make these a lot shorter. The next, I should have about 2 more of these coming in the near future, and then I'm going to experiment with some different topics and formats. I've got some ideas. If you like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. Follow me on Twitter. And yeah, just reach out to me, because it's great to hear back from people who are watching. I only got a few viewers for each video, but if one of you responds, then I know I'm doing the right thing. So yeah, I'll catch you guys next time in the wonderful world of Edda and the next episode of The Ghost in the Machine. Bye!